Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Mia Meus. I'm the curator, science curator of the Institute of Science and Technology. Yeah, and I'm very happy you guys showed up in such great numbers. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a talk between a couple of different stakeholders and experts when it comes to design and science collaborations. So we're going to keep it very, very conversational. If you do need us to speak up, please raise your hands or something during the talk. And we're going to open up a section at the end of the talk for questions and input if you want to. Good, yeah. So we're holding this event because the ISTA is a new and young research institute at Klosterneuburg. Although we're very, very young, we're already at the forefront of basic research. That's incredibly an exciting position to be in, but it's also coming with its own challenges. It means that usually the research that is being done by our researchers takes a very long while until it reaches the public's life, the day-to-day life as we know it. So what we're constantly doing is we're trying to figure out how can we make sure that we communicate the research that is happening at the Institute and its relevance to the public, and this in new and meaningful ways to the people, that they can make up their minds about what's happening at the Institute, and also to foster critical thinking and science literacy. So we brought together a couple of different stakeholders, all very, very strong and smart ladies that work in these fields of these interdisciplinary projects. So we have Sarah Hellwagner, who's a platform builder at Artefakten. She builds artist residencies like this one that we are launching now, so you can check it out later if you want to. We have Johanna Pichelbauer, she's a local Viennese designer. She works specifically with new technologies and the emotions that they cause in people and how people navigate these types of relationships that we have, for example, with new technologies and machines. We have Claudia Schnuck, an art science curator, who's basically doing kind of the same job as I, but she's doing it for longer and really, really well. So I'm going to be learning a lot here. We have Yi-Ling Hwong, who's a researcher at our institute. She's the one of the two, and Andrea Stoellner, that I collaborated with on the project that will be seen at the Festival Centrale later. And we have Caroline Muller, who's actually the professor of these two, and is also a cloud researcher from the institute. Yeah, so thank you. We're going to start right off the bat, maybe with some introductions from you, how you would say you relate to design and science, where you see potential of such collaboration and why it's important that we build such platforms as the one we're making now.
Shall I start?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm from Artefakten. It's an agency for art, culture, and urbanity. We are working in the fields of communication, strategic communication, PR, and concept development. And as part of this, we were invited by the AIT, the Austrian Institute of Technology, to create an artist residence program or an art program with them. We did this in 2016. It's called Artefakten, and quite elaborative over the past years. We started off with an experiment. The AIT said, okay, let's do trial and error. We don't want this full concept, A to Z, doing all the steps. We want to be open and free and open-minded, all of us, and do it the way that art and design and science are connected with experiment. So, yes.
Did you have any specific constraints in like what type of creatives you brought in, or how did you select them all?
We started off with a topic that the AIT is dealing with and want to have another perspective on it. Mm-hmm. We had the topic of energy. We have worked with Judith Fegel for 3 years. Judith Fegel's aim is to make energy visible. Mm-hmm. So she was working with the Center for Energy at the AIT and at the high voltage studio, so to say, lab, yeah. And she created fulgurite, so she heated the sand so that it melts and then it brings some kind of sculptural figure out of it. And it was a very funny experience there because the scientists said, yeah, we know what happens when you put high energy into sand. And she said, yes, well, I did some research. I want to do it with this kind of sand and this heat. and let's see what happens. And they were very skeptic at the beginning, and then because of COVID, no one of us could enter the lab. It was just the scientists, Judith, and we managed to get a videographer in there, so that there is some evidence that they did this for the future. And you can see the scientists smiling, the very skeptic scientists then smiling when Judith was taking out the fugurids and cleaning them, and they were just, okay, it's kind of nice doing such things as well.
Yeah. So it's also enjoyable for them.
Yes.
Yeah. What about you as a designer? Why do you collaborate with scientific experts or technologists or other forms of experts in general?
I think it's kind of part of my biography because before I studied industrial design, I studied mechanical engineering at the University of Technology, and I was a bit unhappy there, and I kind of missed the discussion, and there was a huge gap between art and engineering, or design and engineering, and I missed a discussion on what technology, how it affects us personally, and what we work on, what it means for society, and I really missed discussing these topics, and I think it would have helped. I think I might have gone on to the masters as well, because I just did the bachelor because I got so frustrated, even though I was so interested in the engineering part, but I was frustrated with just this narrow view, and so I think that's something that motivates me as well. That I think if we manage to open up and collaborate, then it's better for everyone.
So you went into design after your first studies, so you could like contextualize the things you were making and explore the impacts that they had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Charlie?
So I've many stories. So I've been for the last 8 to 10 years. I've been working at this intersection with many different projects, and many different organizations. So some more in the science engagement community, different science galleries in Venice, Dublin, Berlin, Rotterdam, but also with many scientific organizations like the European Space Agency, European Southern Observatory, currently also with the Helmholtz Center in Munich with stem cell research. So there's always a lot of stories. I hear often this, that the artists, but also the scientists sometimes get a little bit frustrated with this very narrow view, and also with some dynamics within the scientific community when you're always bound to publish and write the next funding round application without being able to really contextualize what you're researching. Because as a scientist, you're also interested in this context and also in different forms of knowledge and perspectives on your work. So working with artists is super valuable for scientists in that sense. And the other way around, it's also that the artists barely artists who are really not into the scientific discipline, but really bring a lot of background knowledge when they engage with the scientists. So there are many stories and many ways to engage, but also to think about, do we want to enhance more the process? I've done also some residencies that were more focused on really the artistic research and the art science exchange, and no idea about the outcome. Others are more interested in also trying to find different ways of working with the public engagements, looking about how can we create exhibitions that are interesting for, as I don't want to say science communication or outreach in that sense, but somehow connect to that because it creates an experience about the science being done in the context of the science being done, or also create some kind of curiosity in why you should engage with science. So there are many different ways and many stories to tell.
Amazing. Then maybe the scientist perspective from Yi-Ling. What convinced you to actually collaborate with a creator? How Because I feel like in our case it was very casual that the project happened and we discussed it over coffee, and generally it was just a constant exchange of ideas and like stories and anecdotes. The same with Andrea. Yeah. So what's your perspective? Like why is scientists excited about such collaborations?
So I think for me it really happens over a coffee. I remember it was like I just first started in ista and someone invited me for coffee. Like most great ideas, it always happens over coffee. And then you asked me what I did, and I told you like sometimes I spend my day modeling a droplet, and from there you just born this idea of creating a cloud machine and trying to combine science and art. And I really like the idea, and I think it's very poetic because Caroline and me, we both focus on researching clouds. And it's always very funny when I tell my friends and family I research clouds, and they're like, oh, the IT cloud, the AWS cloud, the Google cloud. And it always makes me laugh, and I was like, no, actually physical clouds. And then I thought about it, actually there's a very interesting connection between the physical clouds in the sky and the cloud you hold in your hands, because we actually use IT cloud infrastructure to study the clouds in the sky. So I thought there is a very poetic connection there. Mia, you actually brought that idea even further. You thought about creating a cloud machine, having people upload their pictures, so connecting the two clouds in a very concrete way. I think that is something that is probably a way to bridge the gap between the two things that you guys are saying. And I really like this idea because I think science and art actually have the same motivation and goals, maybe. Like, it's very similar in the motivation because they are both motivated by a deep sense of curiosity about the unknown. Whether it's like the starry skies above, physical laws that govern our universe, or the moral universe within us, our hopes, our desire, our joy, our sorrow, our hope, our sadness. And then there is the same goal as well. I think science and art both have the same goals, and we want people to be able to understand something, we want to communicate something, whether it's true, it's not what you see, it's what you make other people see. Both art and science function in the same way, and hopefully as scientists we will be able to make people see things in a more, like we enrich people in a more rich way, in a more informed way. So I think that they have both the same motivation and goals at the end of the day.
What about you, Caroline? I mean, we, for example, we actually did not have a lot of contact during these kind of first creative interactions that happened at ISTA. But funny enough, you were also a huge inspiration for it because you mentioned the cloud campaigns in a brief situation where we were like talking between like door and angle, that then sparked this whole idea of like, oh, we could actually be collecting data with people, with the public for an art installation that both triggers the room and creates a data set that maybe even Andrea can use on afterwards. So as somebody who's been an inspiration but not directly collaborating with the creative yet, how do you feel as an ISTA professor? Where do you see like potentials that could happen at ISTA from such things?
Yeah, so thank you. I was inspired. I have to say that this thing, discussing with Andrea and Yi-Ling, it was a really great endeavor. I think being a climate scientist, one of my biggest frustration is to see resistance in the public when we talk about climate change. And I think it means we have to make people just doubt or think or question, is it anthropogenic and is the climate warming? By the way, the answer is yes. And I think art, the media is also means that art can help us reach more people and help how people react to what's happening and trying to do what they can to limit the effect of increased greenhouse gases. So that's one big incentive to be more involved in science communication and outreach. And I think arts is a wonderful media for that, obviously. And then I think arts and science more generally are very connected, and we have plenty of examples that, for instance, there are studies of paintings of cities where the color of the sky changes with pollution, and so we can trace back the history of pollution thanks to painting, for instance. Or when there's a big volcanic eruption, same thing, the sky changes color, and so it has inspired painters and writers actually
Frankenstein was written after a big eruption because the weather, it was a little colder, so the weather was not as nice, and it was a bunch of friends who decided to write short stories, and Frankenstein was one. So I think there's a connection between the two that's also obviously very interesting and rich.
Yeah, on poetic sense, it's just two very often perceptively different ways of looking just at life and like understanding the world in a way. And something that's also, as a curator of the Institute, what was funny to me was that in the beginning when I started at the Institute, everyone was like, you're going to be at like a research institute, there's going to be scientists, it's such a different environment, there's no creative people there, and then you show up and there's only creative people. And the environment is basically exactly the personalities are really the same. There's people who burn with curiosity and drive, that work late nights and really early mornings, that have like lists and lists of to-do lists and ideas of things they want to make. And the best question is always like if you ask somebody like, oh, is there something you've always wanted to make? You get A4 sheets full of like scribbled ideas. So there's so much potential there that we just need to give form to in a way. And I think that's also why we're building an artist residency now, why we're building a museum in the next couple of years, where we're trying to create more platform and opportunities for collaboration with creators, because we see that both we and the public need these different entry points into the research topics that we're already working on. Just seeing things from a different angle, trying something there. Like the one we said with Lupe, which was like, no, I did some research myself. It might be a little bit from the art perspective and a little bit more amateur, but sometimes it just takes this little thing that's very interesting. But from the perspective of the institute that is just starting out doing this, I think we also are really curious about the challenges that arise there, because those collaborations are not always easy. Sometimes it's a matter of opinion, sometimes it's a matter of artistic freedoms, sometimes it's a question of time management, communication, or other frameworks. So from your individual perspective, what was so far, or maybe in the future, an obstacle or a challenge that you've come across, so that you could imagine is tricky in such a context?
With the Beziehung project, we had a lot of obstacles in the beginning, because the AATs wanted to do it as an experiment, and so just said, okay, we want to do something on the topic of energy. We want to have a different perspective of energy, show a different perspective on energy. But they made the mistake to not ask the scientists or the Center of Energy first, anyone there who wants to do this, who's interested in that, who has the resources for that. So they just invited Judith and then said, have fun. Yeah? And she then came there and said, okay, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in this, I'm interested in this. And then there was, okay, we have to check if we can do this. And unfortunately, some said no chance. So it was really, really hard work to get their confidence to open up. Because AIT is also, it's a research institution, but they're very focused on applied technology. So there has to be an outcome in a specific amount of time. So some of them just said, okay, we don't have the time for the experiment. We don't have time to try something different.
There's no capacity.
Yeah, there was no capacity. But in the end, it took us some time. Took us a lot of energy, it took us a lot of meetings and communication, and getting the confidence actually that Judith Fegel is an artist who knows what she's doing. And in the end it worked out, but it took us, and then there was COVID, so it took us, her residency lasts for I think 3 years, although it was, the concept was to have it for 1 year. But because of COVID and because we really wanted to do this and really wanted to make it happen for Judith, we really took this time and took this energy, and in the end it worked out.
What made you decide going for a 1-year residency in comparison to just a couple of months, for example?
Because the AIT wanted to give it its time.
Okay.
They cannot, I don't know, or they don't want to, I don't know, but they just said, okay, we don't want to say, here's the budget of 10,000, we just want to have it open, see what comes out. And if it's possible with less money, it's fine. If it needs more, we have to take more time so that we have more budget.
And they might have also anticipated that the whole time challenge, capacity challenge might arise.
Yeah, in this part, they're really open, which can be challenging because as a cooperation partner or as a partner in the organization, like I am, or like the one who's planning it, it's hard because some things you can't plan. You just have to be flexible. But when they are flexible, so we can be and try it out. So yeah.
What about you?
I think one difficulty is kind of finding the common interest as well. Like it's hard in the beginning to know what questions to ask, because when I get into a project, I want to just hear about it, and then I'll try to find the poetic moment or the poetic potential in someone's work, and it's hard to ask for that. So it's and I think sometimes it's not easy to know for both people, like, or to accept that the way I'm looking for something is completely different. Like I don't have a proven method for this, but it might be unexpected what I'm interested in. Like for example, when we actually worked together in Aspern in Seestadt, it was a commission where Seestadt, I don't know if everyone knows it, it's this new part of town where they're doing a lot of experimenting with how smart living and living in a smart home is accepted by people who live there. And there's a lot of research in that, and it was our job to kind of communicate it, but also question the different modes of how people accept this. And it was really hard in the beginning to find a common ground, and the scientist didn't really get what we wanted, but in the end, so the result was really satisfying, but the process wasn't satisfying at all. And so that happens sometimes, and I think it's valid, but that's a difficult.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think it was also specifically tricky because they had to fit us into workshops that were technically for different purposes, and then just set the two designers and then we're like, just listen to the creativity part.
Yeah, so very often in my job I'll sit somewhere and not know what the abbreviations mean, and like hearing BIM all day, and then everyone's talking about BIM, and you're like, what kind of joke is this? Like, are they making fun of me? And then, okay, it's like building information management or whatever. And like, I don't know, it's also the excitement of it for me, and it's kind of, it's if this is met with respect, and if you're not just the clown, then that can be a really cool space to be in as well. And it can also be cool to be the clown in a way. And you can have you have different you can ask different questions as a clown.
What's the curator perspective?
Curator slash also residency project builder. It's I think we already heard a little bit the organization. So the organization as such can be an obstacle or a challenge, because depending on what kind of structure, and as you say, there are younger institutions and older institutions, but some really can't deal with the concept of an artist in residence, for example, or working with an artist in scientific space because of safety regulations, because of contracting, because of how the typical process and cycles of projects evolves. How do you use or specific facilities? Who governs these facilities? What are the abbreviations? Where to go to? Whom to ask? But organization can also be tricky in another point, and that's management decisions, which can change when there's change in specific positions. So many big projects just were ended after a CEO was exchanged at an organization. So this can be really painful for these projects, even if they are super. So this more is an example of a friend of mine who did a big project at Autodesk in San Francisco, and it was run for over 5 years, and they, I think they took about $7 million to build the space, and they had 45 people running it with, I think, 3 cohorts of 16 artists every year. And then the CEO changed and wanted to have this more as an innovation center. So it changed from being an artist in residence to innovators in residence space, and everything was completely changed from inviting creatives to making startups possible. So this is something that these projects always can be somehow in danger when management changes. On the other hand, yes, so the question is who wants to collaborate and who wants to work with that. So I think scientists definitely should have a say that if they would like to engage, and what is the conversation. I think if what I experienced a lot at the beginning of these interactions is that many scientists don't have an understanding of what contemporary art and design can do. And they ask often for, okay, now I'm in this position and I can give information, but this it takes a little bit of time and experience to get into the process and to accept this also joint creative process instead of just giving information at certain points in time. So I think this is mostly very much appreciated, but it's sometimes takes time and a lot of trust, a building of trust within the organization, and a lot of mediation process, so that often there are single scientists who are really enthusiastic, but for the rest we really need to build and work with them and create some experience also for the scientists, so that they say that it's really also enriching for them, for their practice. And then I think the time question is something else as well. It's good projects need time, and space and funding. And I think this is also what I experience often with art science projects, is that they end too soon and don't have enough space to unfold, even if there would have been more potential, because it's mainly understood as something at the fringes of the organization that is interested in it. So this is something else that I also experienced as obstacle in many situations.
Where would you see a challenge that could arise? I think it was really enlightening to hear the perspective of curators, because I think one of the biggest challenges for scientists is always to communicate our science. I would say that as publicly funded scientists, we have a duty to communicate, but from a scientist's perspective, it's always really hard to summarize things in a very punchy way and a headline-grabbing way. Always hear scientists saying, "Oh, I have to do it," when you talk to the artist. Exactly. But yeah, exactly. But I think this is something that is about trust, as you said, because I actually did my PhD in science communication, so trust is such a big issue. And I think when you are too focused on your research, sometimes you lose perspective on the big picture. And because science is inherently very complex, and I think art is actually one way to make people understand the complexity. And so I'm still learning, and I think there is a lot of value in actually having people understand that science is not just facts. Science is actually a lot about reducing uncertainty. We are not 100% sure about everything, but we are 99% sure. Tomorrow we might be 99.1% sure. And that is something that I feel it's very important for people to understand, and art is one way to make people understand that.
But also art is good at, dealing with the fact, dealing with uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly.
Dealing with the fact that we might not be able to reduce it, but to live with uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a bit boring if you know everything.
There's nothing left to see. So basically, Caroline.
Yeah, a lot was said, and I agree with pretty much everything. I think there's really a technical obstacle. Like we are, as scientists, we're evaluated on papers, on our outputs, and the time we put in communicating and working with artists is taking from our scientific work, and so it's a time issue. It's also not evaluated not just for the career, but also as our scientific imprint in the end. So I think that's one limitation. We can that many things at one time. And I agree totally with the communication problem as well. Like it takes a lot of time to communicate, trust, and understand what the artist's approach and philosophy and output is and what can be done. And that's something that, I mean, as a scientist, I don't know anything about it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work at the beginning just to understand how each other can complement and help each endeavor.
Speaking of trust and speaking of telling the right stories, I think there's this one huge point, and sorry, unprepared question incoming. Specifically, if you're a critical designer, a critical artist, and you work with scientists, you always are on the line of where's the what's the headline? How do I get people? Where's the catchy, poetic, good story in there? But where's the line between storytelling and fact? And I think that one is always really tricky. I mean, Johanna and I, we come from a background where we look at scientific, technological, social, and political trends, and we extrapolate from there. We move into the future that is actually still uncertain. We try to figure out what might happen, and then we bring back artifacts and ideas from there, put them into experiences and objects, and try to allow the audience and the public to make up their mind about those new technologies or these new sciences. Trying to give them some agency into like, what are we going to move towards to and what's the most preferable way to get there. But it always comes with this weird moment where you have sometimes people who take this thing that is physically there already as fact. And I think,
I had a few situations where I had a little bit of a problem, and just not even a month ago, I was in a jury meeting where we did not fund a project because of a certain problem there. And it's I previously also was engaged with some projects. I think if you're, for example, studying and really working around speculative design and bringing this in a very strong critical discussion and context, it's doable. But then you have also, I think you should also, when you really work with the scientists, go from what is scientifically there as a starting point and what are relevant questions. But for example, as soon as you take this speculative design object into a science museum, which was the case with one of the projects that I was working with many years back. Here we really got into this problem, and it was about nanobots, which were 2016, far from where they are today. And it was very speculative, and the Science Museum was super hesitant about showing anything because it's just too much with the infographic and so on and so forth. It was just too much of, okay, these things are already there, and it's already something that can be used with medicine, and everything that also connects to the human body and medicine is then again also a very tricky point. But actually this was done in a different context where something did not get any support because it used a scientific question which is still not answered as a speculative design project talking about cancer cures. And then this is I think there you also as a curator need to see, okay, how much can I go without recreating something that is at least has the potential to misguide the audience, but also has the potential to ruin a scientist's career. Because if the answer is no, this is not the right way, or this is not a good scientific approach, then this can also become super tricky. If you have then an art object or a design object out there that is stating something and that is maybe, it depends also, of course, on how good the artist or designer is to talk about this, but you also have to be aware that these projects then also have a life of their own. So as artists and as designer or as scientists, you're not always there to defend what you've done. So this is really tricky. I think you can ask questions and you should ask questions and you should engage in this critical design. But if you go too speculative on very, very thin grounds, it becomes really difficult.
I think specifically from your point, what's very interesting is both the fact that you mentioned that the spaces that the things are being exhibited come with different values. Like a science museum is a space of trust. What you see in a science museum, you believe, right? So that's definitely also coming in there. Like you can't just put the same project into many different spaces and expect it to operate the same.
It's something different if you put it into a contemporary arts museum in a very critical exhibition that is about envision futures or about also questioning very difficult currently very important discussions about, for example, so we've got these envisioned futures by industry, by science, by technology, and then we've got all these questions about colonialization, for example, and then we put it together when we think about space travel and exploring space. So do we want to repeat, for example, the same problems that we did with colonialization on Earth, just somewhere else through mining, for example? So then you can, of course, go into this very speculative, very critical discussion, and everybody will go with it in this discussion and understand that it is something hypothetical, something speculative. But as soon as it's too close to science communication, then it gets really difficult.
I think personally, this is coming from a designer's perspective, but I feel like that's where sometimes envy artists, specifically fine artists, because they work with mediums that people recognize as art always. Being a designer with like a product design background, you always have to navigate the design language of plausibility. Like you sometimes build things that look real, that should look real and should feel real, but it's always this really, really fine line of what works nicely, what looks good, what operates the way you want it to, versus what is so there that people are like, oh, but I thought it's real, I thought this is a product, I thought this is already a treatment I can book, I thought this is a service that's already out there. And in some ways it's sometimes good because it causes these emotions where some people are like, oh no, this is horrible, I don't want it, why do we even have this? And in other cases it actually shows a need for something that people are craving.
I feel like there are stronger tools than trying to cheat on people. Trying to, it's like, yeah,
absolutely. I think you have a very, very strong design language and it's very specific to you. And you always, in your project, have a very nice balance of how much do you need to show to convince people that this is the object to this specific topic without actually making something that looks like it could be bought in the store, comes directly out of the lab.
I find humor really important in my projects. I feel like humor often works as a mediator between us as scientists and artists and designers and the public. So the comical perspective rather than focusing on a utopian or a dystopian.
I think we are running low on time, so I'm going to ask one last question around and we're going to open it up to the audience. If nothing stops you and you can do the ultimate artist-scientist collaboration, from your perspective, what's the one thing you would do really making? It could also be a news art science collaboration platform or anything. What or what's the one thing that has been always in the back of your mind? It didn't work so far. What are the frameworks that have to be there? Could be traveling to Mars, so more distractions there.
So within the AIT, it would be great because there is a change management next year, so we don't know if it will continue after next year. So for this project, I would be really great to have some kind of, they have centers, so to kind of have a real center for art and science research, or art and science residency, to have this center specific on the topic, on this collaboration colleagues, and then this with the resources and the energy and people who want to do this, and also this would be great. Such a kind of institution for it.
Something that I think a lot about these days is how you can do a residency with a small child, or if that's possible at all, and whether. So I don't even know what to ask for with a small child. Like, I don't know what modes would work, but I'm very, I'd love to experiment with that and see if I can take my child along, if I can take my partner along, if I can, just leave them here and leave on my own. I don't know, like, what different modes there are, and I'm sure a lot of people have worked on different solutions, but that's something that I'm thinking a lot about at the moment, because I miss being abroad.
So I would totally subscribe such an art science center. So what I experience a lot is that it's always not enough time and not enough space and not enough funding for art science projects. So this is something that's why something like the art science center would be wonderful. I also experience in the community that many people working in this intersection are often close to burnout because they have so many projects, because it's all so minimal funding. So it would be great to get a little bit more room to explore and to work with the artists and the scientists, both, and to support these projects. And one thing that I'm thinking about is that I would like to write another book, but it's also difficult. As we talk about art and science, who's responsible, artist funding or science funding? So it would be good to have a little bit more room for working with this.
I think because we're in climate science, and when you read about climate science, it's always doom and gloom, the world is ending and there is nothing we can do about it. So if I could work on anything, I would like to be able to empower the public, like a project that says there is something we can do, we are not doomed yet. So little things, I think there is power in numbers. Like, you feel like I cannot do something, but then in a big group of people you can actually do something. So to change the messaging on climate science a little bit, to actually empower people to do something about it.
From a scientific point of view, I think there's two levels. Like, the easiest thing is, in terms of arts and science, is to use art as a science communication tool, so trying to explain our science. And one of the ways to empower people is to explain science, because climate change is not a belief, it's not a belief, it's not a religion. We have our own science, we have our own religion. So one thing is to use art to communicate our science, and I think that's super important. And if I were more ambitious and I had more time, I would use art to raise questions in people's minds. Not just to explain and answer questions, explain what I know, but use it to show, if you warm ice, it's melting, or just showing something and you see the circulation of the ocean and you can slow down, but you don't answer. I'm not trying to explain or teach something. I'm just trying to, make people think about those issues that we work on all day long. And I think that would be very ambitious, but I think that would be great, actually. To use art and science.
An exhibition on climate science.
And then me at the takes over.
Yeah, good. Thank you all for your brilliant answers. In this case, I would open up the the floor to questions from the audience, if there are any. Yes, please.
I'd be curious to maybe hear more, because there was already in the talk the little confrontation between scientific standpoints, where it appears to be, or the aim appears to be to model certainties or produce certainties, especially in a time where we really try to grasp stable grounds in a way to navigate through this mess we are currently situated in. And on the other hand, there's the artists and the designers that kind of try to deal with the opposing thing, the uncertainty, and with this mess and, I don't know, confusing entanglement somehow. And I wonder if also in science there might need to be some sort of paradigm shift, because I feel like this this language of always like trying to produce certainties is also questionable to me, because I feel like there's like even the tools we use in science, sometimes they feed back to the very system we are modeling. For instance, in climate science, there, I don't know, it might be like we use the very tools or sensors we use, they again feed back to the very atmosphere we are modeling, or we're trying to model. Also, we see with a lot of we see that especially nowadays, a lot of models are working less and less efficient due to the climate obviously being less stable, but also like due to all this anthropogenic impact we have on our climate. So we, on the one hand, we have like ever more powerful sensors and computational tools, but we do not necessarily end up with more precise outputs. So I wonder, should it really be the goal to, I don't know, model certainties in a world like this, or should it also be more about like trying to disentangle these relationships and maybe also, I don't know, like question the lab environment we're very much situated in these contexts as scientists and artists somehow?
I mean, the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, that outputs the science state of the art of climate change every 4 or 5 years, they have thought a lot about this, how to not only communicate uncertainty, and just at the science level, how to measure uncertainty and try to estimate it. And so we have quantitative ways, but they also came in the IPCC report. We are very confident, we are extremely confident, so that means like 50%, 90%. So there are efforts in both quantifying and communicating this uncertainty, and it's a whole science in itself. And then I think with climate change, I mean, there are uncertainties, there are models, but now we measure it, like we gain more than 1 degree already. So I think the discussion has changed, because before it was a prediction. We knew that with increased greenhouse gases, we would have warm temperatures by the 80s already. But now we measure it, and it's not just warming. The ice is melting, the ocean is more acid. I don't want to depress all of you for your weekend, but anyway, it's more than just warming. It's really a change of climate, and now we measure it. So beyond uncertainty. And so I think I would say the discussion has shifted a little bit in the past decade. I think people are much more aware. Still, uncertainty needs to be measured, I agree. But I think it's maybe less the focus now. I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's not about producing certainty, it's about lessening uncertainty. That is like a shift in how you look at things. So in any case, there is, like Caroline said, it's like maybe before that 10 years ago we are 90% sure, and then now we are 95% sure, but we are still not 100% sure. And like you say, models become more complex. When models are more complex, you introduce uncertainties into it, and we are aware of it. Like every time, we are always trying to make the models understandable. Like more complex models might be more accurate, but it's less understandable, and we want to be able to explain the model to people. So there is always a tug and pull, even within the scientific community. Trust me, we have a lot of discussions about this, and we are aware of it. And I think one of the problems is probably how to communicate this internal conflict within the scientific community to people, to tell them we know this problem, everything you guys are worried about, we are also worried about that, and we are working on it. But sometimes I think there is a fear of when you tell people you're not certain about things, and you know, people might say, oh, if you're not sure, why should I trust you? But yeah, it's a negotiation between the public and scientists.
I think this is not only a negotiation between public and scientists, it's also somehow deeply rooted in education. Because when you're a school kid, you're forced to learn by heart what is true and what's not true, especially also in natural sciences, what's true. You never talk about science as an ongoing process to reduce uncertainty, to know more, and that if you know more, you might put a different light on something that you've known before. And then it shifts, although what you've known before is still there, but it shifts because you added new knowledge. And I think this is something you never learn at school. And many people just, when they drop, or when they finish school, they drop out of this continuous engagement with science, and suddenly there's all these conflicting notions and all these new insights, so it's never the truth. Even if you have, and then you add complexity and thus more entanglement of whatever aspects. So I think this is also something it's not only about shift in science, but also shift in education and shift in how we talk about science.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful panel. It's inspiring, and I have two questions. The first one is on dealing with these complications of bringing complex concepts available towards the public. Have you ever had the situation where the media takes your words or your exhibition and kind of twists it and conveys a wrong message? First of all, how do you prevent this from happening? And if it happens, do you try to alleviate it, or is controversy a part of the aims that you create? And the second one is towards me, like being involved in the creation of this exhibition. How did it change your everyday way of doing research?
Okay, with the second question, how did it change my way? Oh, that is such a very interesting question. I think I'm becoming more aware of the impact of my work. Like that is something scientists always say, but when you are very deep in the science, sometimes it's very easy to lose perspective of the big picture. And although that is always in the back of my head, like my work has impact, but when you really talk to people and when you're involved in a project like this, and when like just through talking with Mia, with Andrea, with Caroline, with like even my friends and family, and you see there is a conversation and people tell you what they think, and it suddenly clicks in my head, oh, what I'm doing is actually having a change, like people are curious about it, people are actually interested, and it lifts your mood. So it's like doing science is not just about, oh, my model not working, why is this, like I'm debugging the whole day, but actually there is actually some fun and meaning in it. So that's actually, it has been very inspiring. And this question, you want to be?
Yeah, the misunderstanding part. I mean, I've had projects misunderstood. Like, the project kind of went viral back then, and it was a makeup robot, and it was very fun, and it was interesting to see people interact with the robots and to see how much they trusted different robotic setups, to see how many degrees of freedom the robots had with people still trusting and then people losing trust, and how the fact that they were completely shit because we were not good programmers. I'm still not, but how that actually helped people trust the robots because they were so cute and kind of had so many bugs. And in the newspapers, all of a sudden, like it went viral, and there were a lot of articles about how an Austrian research center has developed the perfect makeup robot of the future. And in that case, I found it quite charming, and I found that the misunderstanding is something that's even valuable for a discussion in the field, to think about how what we're which tasks we are happy to trust the machine with. And so in this case, the misunderstanding actually helped. In other cases, I guess it's dangerous. So I think it's often hard to predict what happens with the project.
Claudia also said something earlier that was very nice and fitting. As an artist, and I think as a scientist as well, you're not always there to defend your work and put it into context. So you also have to make sure the things you're putting out into the world have to work somewhat without you. And then it's just, I think, constant reinforcement of the points you're actually making over and over again.
But then there's another topic that I found interesting. So we made a fairy tale. Actually, Felix is there, who is in the project with me. We made a fairy tale about King Gaffer, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, who's giving people presents, and the peasants are kind of to kind of illustrate the relationship that we have with media. And the result was some animations that a lot of people wanted to use for themselves and in their schools, and they asked if they could just take them and do whatever they wanted with them. And I didn't feel good about that at all. And it made me think about who I'm doing this work for, and thinking about commons, and thinking about who owns these ideas and who should own them, and how hard it is for me to let go of the ownership of this work, even though our main motivation for doing this work was getting it out to people. But then still this lack of control and the fear of what could happen with it and what could people make with it, and am I then still responsible? So like that feeling is also I found it interesting. I didn't know what to make of it, but this commons, the idea of commons and who owns which ideas is something that I think is a big topic in both the artistic and the scientific world.
Funny enough, really cool article on MIT Media Review a couple of weeks ago. The inventor, the scientist that invented CRISPR, was talking exactly about this, about how the tool that they use for science is now kind of all over the place, and people use it for very different things. And you've invented something that completely changes the paradigm in so many fields, and this weird situation where do you feel responsible? How much do you stay involved with the discussion? Because people also look at you as like the founder of it, the originator, the creator. Yeah, it's definitely something that both disciplines to share about.
You mentioned that there's a certain frustration that can arise at the end of a collaboration between artists and scientists. And I also experienced it as a project manager in such collaborations. So do you have any ideas on how to create a sustainable ending to such a collaboration? Because I think the basic idea that everyone has is I don't look at the picture of us in it, and it's like really what you.
Yeah, actually, trying to get a little bit of documentation is always a good reminder. So, because I've also worked with artists where the artists were a little bit frustrated in an artistic residency because it was an artist research residency and not a production residency, so that it was only the research phase funded. So it's a little bit difficult for the artist to, okay, I have this great opportunity, but then what stays? So I think having at least a little bit of a final event and final documentation that's presented to the institute, or something that also, in the case, for example, when there is no artistic production, that you can have some kind of a support from the scientific institution to get more art funding to produce something, so that you can somehow still engage in the collaboration, or at least to use it and to have your formal backup to get the funding. So this is something that I think is very important. I think it also helps to have a little bit of an entry point, so that you don't really completely abandon the relationship, or at least have a curator on site to still get in touch with and to talk to. I think is empty props, because it's of course immediate.
Emotional aftercare.
Yeah, and I think it's also super interesting on the other side. It's not only interesting for the artists, it's also interesting for the science institution and the scientists, because of course they want to know what happened afterwards, what were the artworks, where were they presented, what is the feedback also in the artistic community. So I think this is also something many scientific institutions and scientists complain that, okay, now the artist was here, but what happens actually? Who sees it? What's the reaction? So a little bit, yeah, following up and having also this motivation and potential. Because as I said before, often it just ends and then there is no funding and then everybody has they have full projects. So to have someone at the institution, if it's institutionalized, to at least follow up with what the artist does and all these things is definitely helpful. And then on the other hand, maybe some sketches or whatever. If you don't leave the artwork there, just some impressions, so that there's still a little bit of connection and something happens, so that it's not completely somewhere in limbo.
May I add something at AIT? We have the third residency right now, and we are trying to elaborate some kind of community building, some kind of regular events with talks, with guides, having the scientists working with the artists and their colleagues connected to the artists, not even the ones they really work with, but maybe the other ones, and hopefully it will last the project, so the community will grow. Because actually right now we sometimes get, or I sometimes am asked by scientists at the AIT, who have a friend who's an artist, and he or she asked me about some kind of technology. Is there a way of producing this project? So I think for those kind of projects, the kind of community building, or building an art and science community within the institution, at least is a good idea, maybe. Yeah. Also get in contact with the institutions.
I think it's really important because you, talking from a community building perspective, you create all those leads, and then you make it stop and you break it off, and you can like establish a strategy to create a cloud of people and ideas, and keeping that sustainable.
Yeah, and I think there having the science curator is a good first step, because then you really have a person who can also take care of following up, seeing where all this develops, but also following up with the scientists if there's still some interest, or inviting someone back for a talk or whatever. So, but if you don't have this institutionalized in the organization, it's very much to the artists and to the scientists, and then it gets really tricky because it's also, unless you really form a friendship, it's very difficult to follow up and to keep this going.
Any last questions? Otherwise,
So thank you so much for the conversation. It stirs a lot inside me because it touches, I think, all the aspects of my character as a physical physicist, as an employee of ista and communications team, also as a climate activist who wrote a book, so also kind of the artist side inside me. And I wonder, and this is a question that I constantly ask myself, and I would appreciate your input on it. So what is the responsibility of art or science, or art and science, in this climate crisis, for example? Especially considering that research has shown that showing people research doesn't work. And also that artists somehow kind of, so that the aim of art is sometimes raising awareness and giving poetic moments, but maybe not mobilizing or supporting, encouraging the people to take part in this transformation. So these are kind of the two answers that I want to exclude. So what is the responsibility of arts and sciences?
I think you'll get a lot of answers.
Yeah, you will get a lot.
So of course, then you have the designers and the artists, so you're working with both. So there are also different roles. where the designer can maybe even support the mobilization, whereas the artists are more raising question and critical discussion. Then, of course, and sometimes I think it's a little bit of knowledge and how we perceive and how we know, because then there's this individual knowledge that is true for us, and then there's the scientific objective knowledge, and not everything is really the same, because there's emotions and complex situations in place that might hinder me engaging with the scientific knowledge that's presented to me. So experience, emotion, different kind of aesthetic and sensory experience are super important to raise more awareness. So I think art and design both are super important there. And also to engage with this bridge between the individual and the very abstract rational knowledge. Yeah, and I think it's then up to people. It's not up to art and science alone, it's up to people, reaching out to them.
I really agree with what you said about using emotions, and I actually don't 100% agree with what you said about using facts don't really work, because actually you need both. And like what my research has found is that there are two kinds of truth. There is factual truth, and then there is emotional truth. And when you find that you don't agree with someone, you can actually try to appeal to their emotional truth. And for example, you can say, I'm worried about pollution. And that is something you know maybe this person you're talking to might be worried about as well. So you're acknowledging their emotional truth. And then from there, you open the door to talk about factual truth. And then you can say, do you know climate change actually causes pollution? And pollution is something that actually impacts all of us. So there is both. You can use emotions to appeal to other people's intellectual side. So, and yeah, art is also a way, using language, using the right language to talk to different people, tailoring your message to different groups of people. Like, for scientists, it's always hard, always trying to use facts. I catch myself, I'm like, research has shown blah, blah, blah. But then it doesn't always work. So I have to actually pull myself back and try to ask that question, what are you worried about? What is your emotions? And then try to acknowledge that and then use that to talk about facts.
And yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of movements and a lot of young designers designing tools for activism.
I think specifically in design, it's this weird distinction where some designers build tools for agency, like things they innovate in ways that allow people to move towards more sustainable lifestyles, maybe CO2 neutrality, negativity even maybe. And then there's the other mode of designers and artists who are maybe also storytellers, which projects are focused a lot on like just showing alternatives, showing how you could do it different, but not alternative in the sense of like alternative truth. It's just alternative modes of like actually getting the things done that we need to do by staying sticking to the facts. Just like twisting and tweaking some of the things we're doing the way we're doing them, moving slowly towards the most preferable option and outcome. Yeah, artists and designers always try to make things better, and I think scientists do too, so yeah. Yeah. Any last questions? Otherwise, I would say we're done with the panel talk. I would wholeheartedly invite you to take a walk with us to the Festival Centrale, where we will have a look at the exhibition together. There's going to be a pop-up cocktail bar. You will get drinks there. You can ask us some questions.
How far away is that?
I think it's 1 kilometer. Maybe Valentina can tell us how far is it? 10 minutes walking. We can take a stroll. We can talk. Yeah. Good. Yeah. So thank you all for coming.